Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this video, I'm going to be putting a few aftermarket items onto the SCX24 Deadbolt. And that includes these tires by RC 4-wheel drive. These are the Rock Locks 1-inch micro comp tires, part number Z-T0028W. And a set of wheels, also by RC 4-wheel drive. These are a steel beadlock wheel. They are designed to add a lot of weight, and they may even accept the brass wheel weights since those were made by RC 4-wheel drive. They're supposed to be for a different name wheel, but they may still fit these rims. Hopefully, we'll see. If that does work, this thing is definitely not going to be tipping over. These are a stamped steel 1-inch stock beadlock wheels in black, part number Z-W0229L. And it even comes with a nice little wheel wrench. That's going to be handy. Here we have a couple of parts by Hot Racing. This is a black aluminum fix for the steering rod links. And it includes a crossbar and the actual steering link itself. It includes the necessary screws for mounting it. It's supposed to take slack out of the system. We're going to check that. This is a brass diff cover. This weighs 9 grams. I'm going to use this on the front diff because that's where we want the most weight. We want to try to keep the front end down. But I have another diff weight coming that is 13 grams. So when that arrives, I'll switch this to the rear and put the 13 gram in the front. Let's see, part number for the, well, here, I'll just, it's, part number for the diff cover is SXTF12CH. And for the linkage, SXTF49X01. So let's first start with the linkage. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm not only going to take the body pins off that let the body flip up, but I'm also going to disconnect the body from the hinge back here. And we'll see. That should make it a lot easier to work on. I'm not sure what size a lot of these pieces of hardware are yet, as I'm just getting familiar with this, ready to run. Looks like a lot of this hardware might be SAE versus metric, but I'm not sure. These little bolts seem to be, but as I recall, the wheels came off quite nicely with a 4mm wrench. So maybe it's a mix. Now, they really use some long bolts for this. That's fine. I'm just going to drop those in there. Set that off to the side. And now we can work on our steering linkage. So first, okay, we're not centered here. Let me get a let me get the radio down and center the steering. Okay. So we want to try to see, okay, this is how much flex we have in our steering here. I'm trying not to overly wiggle the wheels, just move the linkages. So that's a pretty good amount of slack. So we will see what this does. Now, I think what I may want to do, having never taken this apart before, is remove the front shocks, just at the top at least, and that should let the front end hang down a bit. Okay, that wants to stay in place. I'm going to let it. Okay, that should give me adequate access. So I'm going to start by disconnecting the crossbar. Okay, and now I'm going to need to remove the servo arm. And it looks like there's a little servo saver built in there. Yep. There's our retaining spring. The nice thing is that I'm not going to have to worry about centering the steering servo, since the piece that has the servo saver is going to drop back into the original position. So that makes that easier. Okay, so let's see. I'm just seeing if there's a left or a right. I was just wondering if there was a way to have the HR logo facing forward. It looks like they have stamped these in such a way that the logo is going to face straight up, because this has to attach here. If it was reversed, it could do it, but no big deal. And you know what? Just to be safe on these things, I'm going to put a little bit of blue Loctite. Let's see. At least where it's metal on metal. Everything else is going to be on metal on plastic, so I don't have to worry about it. But this is one location that it could conceivably come unscrewed, and if you lose this little screw, you're going to have a hard time finding matching hardware. Oh, wrong wrench. So we got a pretty good movement in that ball socket. So now we need to screw this onto the back side. Okay, put in our spring for the servo saver, our screw, Okay, let's center out the steering one more time. Oh, let me go ahead and put the shocks back on. Hopefully I don't have to undo too much of this to put on the diff cover, but if I have to do some disassembly, so be it. Remember, soft plastic, use 2 fingers, be gentle, don't over tighten. Okay, let's go ahead and turn that off. And here is our new mechanism. And as you can see, it's considerably tighter. Most of the movement we see is coming from the servo arm itself. Or at the wheels, the linkage is locked down tight. That's very nice. And yeah, it looks like I'm gonna have to at least partially disassemble again to do that front weight. So let's say we just knock that out right now. Let's go ahead and throw this trash away. I think I'm gonna be able to just disconnect the cross member here and maybe swing the servo a little out of the way. Yeah, that's perfect. So now I've got easy access to everything. Should be interesting. I'll get to show you the inside of the worm gear case, because this is not a standard differential. First off, like a lot of little kid crawler toys, it's a lock axle, which is pretty much what you'd want for a situation like this. There's no point in building itty-bitty differentials into a toy this small. It'll just drag the tires around a little bit. No big deal. I must say, I definitely approve of the fact that they have made these the holes for the hardware very deep, so the screws go deep into plastic, and they're using very long pieces of hardware, longer than you would expect for something this size. It looks like we got 2 different sizes there. Okay, these 2 came off the top, and we have a shorter one that came off the middle. Let's identify the same over here if there is. Okay, looks like we got 2 long and 4 short. So I'm assuming the 4 short ones are for the pumpkin itself, and the longer ones are for the upper 2 holes. Also, just wanted to show you, if you look here, we've got cutaway for axle, so we may need to put a little grease on there. And looks like there's a depression here for the worm screw drive shaft to seat into. And yes, the short screws are the bottom, are the pumpkin for, and then the long screws are for the upper. Did I leave a screw in there? Yes, I did. And there is a bearing. So let me just give you a look at the insides here. There's our axle gear right there. And there is our worm gear. We have bearings on either side. And there's probably a bearing on the back side of here. And then there's a bearing on the front, which we need to swap over to our brass piece. Okay, let's try this. I wonder if we can get that from underneath. I don't think so. There we go. So what I did was I just used a, this is an M3 screw, slid it into the bearing, gave it a bit of an angle and pulled and let the threads grab the bearing. There's no need to put any grease in there, but I am going to put a little bit of black grease on these two. Well, those also, those hold bearings. So again, those don't need any grease either. So this just goes right back together. And it appears to fit perfectly. So let's get our two long screws right away. I'm not going to tighten them totally down because I want to kind of do this in a star pattern. It's not a huge deal, but still, you want to be, you don't want to put too much pressure at one end versus the other. Might as well put all of these in place. And then just go round and round on them. So I'm going to start down here. And these are easy enough going in that you can just spin the shaft of the screwdriver between your fingers to cinch them down. The threads are already there. You know, the original screws have already tapped out the plastic. So these go in nice and easy. And again, these don't need to be tight. There's no liquid grease in there really. Everything is spun on bearings. There's probably a little bit of lubrication on the gears themselves, but again, you're not trying to hermetically seal this differential. You're just trying to hold everything on, so that's good. Just go one more time around. Okay, everything is snug. So now we can put our linkage back in place. So there we go. We got our nice aluminum components and brass components on there. It looks very good. And I think we're going to see a nice improvement. It's definitely heavier up front now. You can really feel the difference. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause for a second. I'm going to pack up these little parts that I'm not using. Put them in a package for later. Anytime I get these little Ziplocs, I tend to save them. I've got a little cardboard box that I just stick them in until I need one. And they do come in handy. Okay, now that we're done with that, we can go ahead and put the body back on, and then we're going to go and do wheels. So this should be fun. There we go. Finally got one started. Not sure whether it's easier to disconnect at the hinge point or at the body. Having tried this, I'm thinking maybe the hinges are easier to disconnect first, or disconnect at all. And the second one goes in much easier. Okay, now if you will recall from the last video, if you watched it, if you haven't, you might want to go back, check it out. I put spacers on the hubs. Now, I may do that again, but I may go with a slightly smaller spacer this time because according to the manufacturer, these wheels already have a little bit of an offset. They already stick out a teeny bit. And this is a handy little wrench. So, first thing to do is to take out these brass weights. They take a little effort to get out because they just snap in, but once they're in, they want to stay. Go. They're easy enough to get out, as you can see. You just kind of, take a thin wrench that will pass through the spokes and go around in a circle until they pop free. Like that. So, will these go on here? Looks like not, but that's okay, and I will show you why in just a moment. I can tell you in the meantime, the reason is that these wheels are already very heavy, so may not be necessary to add any extra weights. These are going to be heavier than those alone, and I will demonstrate that in a moment. Get out the handy scale. So let's take one wheel and tire and one weight. And that weighs 19 grams combined. for the plastic wheel. Those are the stock wheels with the weight. Let's take one aftermarket tire with foam insert and one steel wheel. And slightly heavier, almost 20 grams. So 1 gram difference. Not a lot. I was really hoping that these were going to work together. I figured that since they were by the same company, it would, but not. These are made for the plastic wheels. So bear that in mind if you're going to upgrade to... So I was saying, if you're planning to upgrade to steel wheels, you might want to either do that right away. If you're not going to be able to do it right away, if they're not available, out of stock, and you're going to need to wait a little bit, go ahead and get these. They're probably $9. They will, keep you, keep you going for the time being, since they weigh almost as much as the stamped steel wheels. But bear in mind, you cannot use them together, at least not with this particular set of wheels. And I'm going to show you the assembly of one wheel, and then I will pause the video and do the other 3. And I will pick back up with putting them on, and we'll test out using spacers, how they compare to the stock wheels as far as fit goes, etc. So the stamped wheels are 4 parts. We have a hub. We have our inner wheel. We have a central rim, and we have our outer wheel. So these two join together around the tire, and then the screws pass through the inner and outer wheels and into the hub, creating our complete wheel assembly. Now I just want to talk about these tires. You can tell just by looking at them that these aftermarket tires are better than these. They're a little shorter, but you can just see the difference in the rubber by looking at it. This is very shiny and plasticky looking, whereas this is really natural rubber looking. I mean, you should be able to see in the light, you can see the difference in the tread. There's a lot more grip surface available. They appear to be a little bit wider. And let's see if I hold them right about the center line. You can see this is definitely a little wider. And it's much softer, much stickier kind of rubber feel to it than these stock wheels. I am surprised they're shorter. You would think they would have made them the same size, having the original to model from, but maybe they were going for something more generic. I don't know. On the upside, that lowers the vehicle a little bit, lowers the overall center of gravity, so that may pay off. Also, those tires are on a rim at the moment, whereas these are not, so that may also contribute to the height issue. So basically you want to put this inner rim inside the tire, like that. And just, kind of make sure it's centered nice and easy. You can go ahead, and there is no left or right side to these tires. They have identical markings on either side. So you slide in the rear side of the rim, the inner rim. These may prove a little tricky to put together, but I think the end result is going to be worthwhile. Lining up the holes for the bolts is very important. Wow, these things really are a pain. Okay, I have an idea. And I can do this because I've got the extra hardware. You guys are going to have to go get some to do it this way. Otherwise, you're just going to have to fiddle and fiddle and fiddle. Hopefully this helps. These things are really tough to get lined up. And you have to be careful because these steel rims are delicate. They're very thin. I'm going to pause the video for a moment. My dogs are trying to get my attention. I got to take them out. So I've been doing some experimenting, and these little wheels are a nightmare to put together. I figured out a way to make it somewhat easier to do, and I will show you that in a minute or two. But I want to talk about some other things. For example, the foams. Not a big fan of these foams. They take up a lot of space, and they have to be kind of compressed. And when it makes it hard to get the tires seated correctly around the rim. The rear, not so bad because it's got this big cup that slides in, but the front is just a little plate, and it's hard to capture the bead properly. And, you know, maybe the tires aren't 100% perfectly formed. One of them I had to take apart and flip the tire over, so try to find the side that's the roundest, cleanest, without any bulging or anything. I've put one together as an experiment without a foam, and I like the way it sits. Once this thing is sealed, no air is getting in, so it's got a little bit of air pressure to it, not a lot, but that's kind of what you would do when you're really off-roading. You air down your tires. If any of you have ever actually done any real off-roading, driven on a beach, things like that, you got to let the air out of the tires down to, like, you know, sometimes below 10 or 12 psi. That's the whole reason to have bead locks, is so that you can run very low air pressure. And so that increases the tire patch. It's going to make it crawl better, and it doesn't sit like it's flat or anything. I like the way that looks, so I'm going to go ahead and leave the foams out. Now, there's another thing that I'm doing that you may consider adding on to yours. Since these wheel weights can't be put in, let me just refresh my memory. Yeah, they're 9.5. Here's the standard inner rim for the beadlock wheel, and that weighs 4.7. Now, this is a stick-on lead material for balancing wheels, and I bought this to see how I liked it. I prefer using the putty style wheel weights. Trying to cut decent sized pieces of this and guessing what the weight is going to be and how it's going to affect the rim isn't easy to do. I prefer being able to put small amounts of putty and just keep adding more and more to the spot where I need to add weight to balance out the wheel. So this happens to be the same width as that inner rim, and I put two wraps, once around and then cut, and then once around again. And if you cut it correctly, you can get it so there's almost no seam. That brings it up from 4.7 to almost 12.6. So almost 8 grams of extra weight was just added to this wheel. That's going to help a lot as far as keeping the front end down. Now, to start, I'm going to do 2 wraps on just the 2 front tires. They're already heavier than stock as it is with these stamped steel wheels. So I'm trying to add a little bit extra to the front end, help keep that front end down, keep it from tipping over. And I was able to, when I did a test mount, I was able to mount the rear tire. You can see that the axle is almost to the end of the bolt, and I've got that same 2.5 millimeter spacer in the stock wheel. The holes for the hexes are deep enough that there's still plenty to grab onto the hex, and plenty of axle left to bolt it on. So in addition to the millimeter or so of offset that's built into these wheels, I've got that extra 2.5, so that's going to space out the wheels even wider than they were with the stock ones with the spacer. So all of that together should really help keep this planted, and we're going to see how that goes. So I'm going to go ahead and continue the assembly process, and I'm going to show you how I get these together without driving myself completely out of my mind. Because trying to get everything lined up, get these little bolts lined up, they're so short. It's hard to, the holes in the rim aren't straight pass through. You've kind of got to screw into it, like almost thread it in. So you can't just drop them in. They don't find the hole easily. And you've got to line up 3 things. You've got to line up the wheel hub, the inner rim, and the outer rim. So what I'm doing is, well, first I need to get the tire on here. Okay, make sure the bead is good. Line up as best you can initially. And then what I've been using is a hobby or modeler's T-pin to kind of line up the hole. There we go. So now I've got the hub lined up with the inner rim. Okay, then I take the upper rim and make sure that you've got it aligned properly. There's a you don't want to have the 2 pieces offset to each other. You'll understand what I mean if it happens, where the holes don't line up correctly. Oh, that hub just dropped out on me. Let me make sure that I'm still lined up there. See, this is very tricky process. A lot of fiddling about involved in it. It'd be a lot easier if the hub was built into the rim. Okay, so now I've got the hub in place. What I've been doing is finding the hole that points straight up a spoke and line that up with another one that is straight up. And then I've taken a couple of the 2 long screws from disassembling the diff cover, and they are smaller than the stock screws. Sometimes what you got to do is drop one of those screws through the 2 rims. Make sure the tire's seated. So see how everything's lined up now. Okay, put your finger on that screw, flip it over, and then get the hub onto that screw. Okay, that went easier than it has on several other occasions while I've tried this. Okay, then take the second screw and put it to the hole directly across from the first one, and this is where the fun begins. Okay, I'm not lined up correctly. As you can see, even though I've already done this several times, it's not easy. Because these holes don't match up to the spoke pattern, so getting the right position so that you can, you're lined up right. Okay, like I said, I try to find the one that's as close to center on one of these spokes as possible. It looks like that's the winner right there. We'll see in a moment. Okay, then, you see, having this long screw, it makes it a lot easier to work with because you don't have to have this pressed into the tire. Otherwise, those little screws are a nightmare to get started. Okay, let's go ahead and start the second screw. Okay, now remember these screws, I'm not threading them in. They're shorter. I mean, they're thinner than these, so they just pass right through the holes without having to be screwed into place. And this is kind of where you want to, you know, fiddle with the tire to make sure that you've got it in the right position. Then holding those two screws in from below, now I've got to try to put the hub on. And once I get this in place, everything goes together nice and easy with the screws, because I'm going to try using a needle nose. Once you get these two smaller, longer screws in place, assembling the rest of the rim becomes a lot easier, because you can start putting in the screws correctly. And you've got everything, you know, they serve as a guide to keep everything lined up. Sometimes it helps to just spin them a little bit with a wrench to get them to slide in. So there we go. Now I've got the hub on the back side. I've got my two rims. The spokes line up all the way around. And now I can start using the correct screws. So kind of hold it down, keeping it together, keeping the rim close, and then start putting in the screws one at a time. And that one went straight in. So, you know, as you can see, once you've got it lined up with those guides, this goes really, really well. Everything, all the screws go in just fine. Now my 2 guide screws should pretty much just drop right out. If they don't fall freely out, you can just pull them out with no effort at all, as you can see. Okay, so just for a comparison, let's take a stock tire. And that weighs in at 10.1 grams. And the weighted tire with the steel rim weighs in at 27.6. So that's almost an 18 gram, or it's almost 17 grams, 17 and a half grams of extra weight, and you can really feel it. So that's going to be nice. That's one of my front wheels with the extra weight. So now I need to put 2 wraps of lead on the next rim to make my second front wheel and put it all together. You'll find this wrench is very handy because the hole here in the rim where the nut drops in, you need a thin-walled wrench, and a standard, you know, one of these probably won't fit. Yeah, it goes in, but not into the rim itself. So it fits between the bolts, but that's not enough to get a good purchase on the bolt. So I'm going to go ahead, put on my spacer. You can really feel the weight of this when you're working with it. There we go. Pick up the bolt with the wrench. Excellent. So 2 out of 4 wheels done, and I'm going to try to mimic the test I did previously. I'll try to set up the bed the same way, more or less, and hopefully I'll be able to get outside for some crawling with this later today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.